Use a plank to get the correct line across the ends of the gallery planking, and then trim the ends of the planks to form a smooth line from the stern frames onto the gallery supports. Now sand off any overhang. You need to ensure that the planks will run in a smooth line from the frames. Take the first plank and place it against the hull on the left hand, which is the port side, between frames 24 and 17. Line up the bottom flush with the bottom of the lower gun deck, then mark, then cut it to length so that each end will finish in line with the middle of the frame. Now apply a thin line of glue along the edge of the deck between frames 17 and 24 with an extra blob where the plank will fit over the frames. Pin the plank in place and remove any excess glue promptly, as it will stop an adjacent planks from butting up tightly to the first one. Take another plank and hold it to the rear of the first plank you placed, flush with the bottom of the lower gun deck. Ensure that the two ends are touching, then mark a length that will just overhang the gallery support. Now bend this plank to follow the curve of the hull before cutting it to length. You can use either an electric plank bender as shown here or a pliers type plank bender cutter. Glue and pin this plank into position, and don't forget to apply glue where the plank touches the ends of the gallery support planks. Now use some masking tape to hold the part into position and allow to dry. The next plank to fix is the one that will curve around the bow. Hold it in position and with one end touching the first plank you fixed, and then mark where the hull framework starts to curve towards the bow. Bend this plank in a similar way, but bear in mind that the curve is much tighter. Start the bend at the point you marked and keep checking against the model to make sure you get the shape right, following a natural curve around the bow. When you are happy that the plank will fit the curve of the bow properly, hold it in position and mark a section that is slightly longer than needed, so the plank will overhang the false keel after cutting. Using a pencil, mark the end of the plank to the centre of the false keel, and then with a sharp craft knife, gently cut away the end of the plank to the centre of the false keel. Now start to fix the next layer of planks above the ones you have already laid. Planking is a bit like brickwork. You need to place the vertical joints so that they don't line up. So start this layer one frame further over. Place the first plank against the hole from the middle of the frame 16 to the middle of frame 23, then mark and cut it to length. Apply glue to both the frames and to the lower edge of the plank, then pin this plank in position. As before, place a matching plank on the right side of the model. Measure, bend and cut a stern plank as you did in a previous step, then chamfer the edge and glue and pin into place. The natural spring of the wood should hold the rear of the plank in place, but you can also secure it with masking tape while the glue dries. The third row of planks is offset 2 frames to the stern from the second layer. Cut the first plank to fit between frames 18 and 25, then repeat the previous steps to complete the third row of planks. Now to begin with, place the first plank for the fourth layer of planks between frames 17 and 24. As before, mark a length that comes to the midpoints of the frames of each end. Chamfer the bottom edge of this plank as you have done previously. Apply glue to the frames and the bottom of the edge of the plank, then pin it into place as you have done previously. Then plank the opposite side of the ship. Complete the fourth layer of planks using the same method as before, remembering to glue the edges of the planks as well as the frames. Note that the rearmost plank overhangs the gallery supports a little. Now start the fifth layer of planks with a plank fitted between frames 16 and 23. Start the sixth layer with a plank fitted between frames 15 and 22. Note that you will have to make a bigger chamfer on the bottom edge of these planks to prevent a gap from opening up, as the curvature of the hull is getting tighter. Cut the rear plank so that it overhangs the last frame by 1 or 2 millimeters. After you have cut the plank, you will not need to bend it, but you will, however, need to reduce the width of the plank by about 1.5 millimeters over the last 130 millimeters. Draw a tapering guideline as shown. Sand the edge of the plank to remove the wood as marked. Check it frequently against the hull to get a good fit. Now fix the tapered plank with glue and pins in the same way as the previous planks. Fit the forward plank in the same manner as previous planks. It does not need to be tapered. Allow the glue to dry overnight and then cut off and remove all of the pins. Mark the positions of the frames on the planks that you have fitted so far. This can be done by lining up a strip of wood in line with the edge of the frame and drawing a line on the planks. Continue to mark both edges of all of the frames. All of the gun ports are 12mm square holes with the lower edge in line with the first plank. The 13 in the centre of the hull have their sternmost side in line with the edge of the rib frames. Double check all positions against the plan and carefully pencil in the squares using a ruler or a homemade jig. Draw diagonals across each square to locate the centre of the gun port. As you can see, the port head of the forward bulkhead should be positioned with its bottom corner just touching the joint between the planks. The gun port closest to the stern comes midway between frames 29 and 30. Make sure that you keep its sides parallel to the frames as shown. Use a sharp point to make a small hole in the centre of each gun port to help locate the drill accurately. The point of a needle works well, as so does a sharp nail. Now drill a 2mm hole through the centre of the gun ports. It's best to use an Archimedean drill or pin vise for this, as the hand tool allows greater control and accuracy than a mini power drill. The wood is soft enough to be drilled with very little effort. Cut just inside the 4 edges to remove a square of planking slightly smaller than that of the marked gun port. Now use a file and gently clean up the edges, making sure that the gun ports are nice and square. Before constructing the stand, check the difference between the 2 frames. One fits under frame 23 and the other under frame 18. The one with the pointed top end fits under frame 18 toward the bow of the model. Now, gently take the parts and sand any rough edges smooth. Glue the side of the stand to the front, ensuring that the 2 parts are square to each other. You can use a CD case or other common household object to check that the parts are square. Let the glue dry thoroughly before continuing. Take the other side piece and glue it to the other end of the front of the stand. Again, make sure that these are square to each other. Place this on a flat surface and allow the glue to thoroughly dry. Finally, glue the rear part of the stand in position. You can also run a bit of glue inside each corner of the frame to make it stronger. Before continuing upward with the planking, you need to trim the stern planks. Carefully trim the overhang ends of the planks with a sharp knife. They should finish flush with the gallery supports. Now sand the overhanging ends flush with the ends of the gallery supports. Now carefully cut the planks flush with frame 30 using a razor saw. Be sure to stop when the saw gets to the tops of the gallery supports. Now use a craft knife to pare off most of the excess planking flush with the top of the gallery supports. Finally, use sandpaper to bring the plank flush with the top of the gallery support. When you have finished, the plank should be flush with the gallery support at the top, bottom and end. Fit the first plank in layer 7 in the same way as before, between frames 24 and 17. Then fit the aft plank. Hold this in position and then put the template from page 98 of these instructions against the hull. Make sure it lines up with the bottom plank and the front of the frame 27. Mark the end of the plank as shown, then cut it to length. This plank needs to be tapered about 1 mm along its whole length. This is to keep the line of the planks parallel to the deck line, rather than rising towards the stern of the vessel. Sand the taper, then glue and pin the plank into position. To prevent the planking from rising too far around the frames 12 to 14, the forward plank needs to be tapered from about frame 13 toward the bow by about 1 mm. You will need to bend the plank, then draw the guideline for the taper by hand. Sand the taper on the plank and then glue and pin it in position. Note that the end pin should be inserted in at an angle. Continue planking the next 2 layers using the checklist on page 99 of step 5. At the stern, continue using the card pattern to check the overhang. Note that the stern plank in layer 9 does not need to be tapered. When you have completed the 9th row of planking, you can safely remove or trim the pins. If the tabs of part 7A are protruding through the bow formers 7, sand the front of the bow formers flush. Mark a length of plank against the bottom of the bow formers 7, allowing a small overlap of 1 to 2 mm. Apply glue where the plank contacts the bow formers 7. Place the plank into position on top of the bow formers. Using some spare planks, using them as packing, place them behind the bow former. Now pin the plank in place, holding the support directly behind the nail. Cut a second plank to fit across the formers above the first one and apply glue to the bottom edges as well as the points where it touches the bow formers. Continue planking to the top of the bow formers. Note that the last plank extends above the frames. Let the glue dry thoroughly, preferably overnight. Remove all the pins as this area will be covered by detailed parts later on. Carefully trim the ends of the planks close to part 7. Do not trim the top of the last plank. Leave it for now as you will cut it to height later on. Finally, sand the ends of the planks flush with part 7 and follow the curve of the bow. Draw 2 short lines parallel to the planking, 4 mm from the face of frame 34. Draw 2 lines at right angles to the first 2, positioning them 24 mm from the edge of the gallery support at the point where you drew the first lines. Now using a ruler to measure 2 12mm squares starting at these corners, this completes the outline of the gun ports. Cut a square just within the edge of the gun port. Again, the gallery support 32 will resist the knife blade at a couple of points. Continue as you did with the gun ports on the side of your model.